animals, I also have a passion for oil heat. So I run a national nonprofit educational program for realtors across the Northeast called Overcoming Obstacles in the Sale and Marketing of Oil Heated Properties. And we are sponsored by NORA, which is the National Oil Heat Research Alliance. We are paid for by a grant through NORA. That's how we're nonprofit. And SEMA, which is the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association, sponsors us. Like we answer to them, and they're the ones who sponsor us to help run our realtor program. And of course, Rachel, I'm a member, an affiliate member, and have been for, gosh, maybe 15 years now. And Rachel invited me in, so I'm very proud to talk to you guys on behalf of Rachel. Now, it's my show, so I get to use this skinny picture. So let me tell you a little bit about me really quickly. First of all, I'm a realtor, just like all of you guys. I have been a licensed New Jersey realtor since 1987. Forever, more than Sylvia, my coordinator, has been alive. So, my come from is real estate. And I point that out to you because I want you to know that I teach this program on behalf of realtors. And as a realtor, I was born and raised in a real estate family. I was answering phones at age 7 at the office professionally. At age 12, I was out with my parents pricing houses. I mean, all I've ever known my entire life is real estate. But 15 years ago, I stumbled on this national nonprofit educational program, and it got me excited. So here I am. I also want to let you know that I'm a CE instructor, and I am, my course is an accredited 3-hour course in Connecticut. So if you like what I bring to the table today, we'll tell you how to sign up for our course. We have many, many options, and you can get credits. And I believe Rachel is going to put me on for the board as well. So that will be an option as well. The bottom line is that it's about selling more properties, because the more educated we are, the more we can educate our clients, the more houses we sell. It's just that simple. So I work with Oilheat Specialists. I work with the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association, and everyone that I work with is a volunteer for my program. And what that means to you is if you need a local oil heat dealer, I can connect you through the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association with somebody in your neighborhood, because I'm from Jersey and I'm sure you don't want to introduce me, but you're welcome to. But you can introduce a local oil dealer who is a member of SEMA, and they'll be able to help you. Now, one thing I want to point out to you, in real estate, let me just go back 2 slides just to demonstrate something. Oh, that's the wrong way. Let me just demonstrate something to you. Not that one. Okay, NORA is to the oil heat industry what NAR is to the real estate industry. It's the National Association. SEMA is to the oil heat industry in Connecticut what your Connecticut Association of Realtors is. And we don't have a local organization. I represent the group as a whole. Now, the difference between NORA and NAR, as a realtor, you cannot practice real estate unless you're a member of your local board, a member of your state board, and a member of your national association. In oil heat, there's no regulations. So you can open up an oil dealership and just run your business without belonging to the association. I represent those that belong to the association because these are the ones I feel comfortable saying reputable dealer. They're a member of my association. They serve on the board. They help institute and they help run professional standards. These are the people. I just wanted to point that out to you. These are the people that implement my program. Okay, really quick, we're going to talk about the most important topic, and that's overcoming objections. We'll get into heating oil storage tanks, heating oil systems, energy efficiency. We're all about that right now, and I'll give you some great resources that you can use immediately. So overcoming objections, overcoming common objections. We're going to stop for a moment and ask you a question. Who knows? And you can unmute yourself, or you're going to do a poll, right, Rachel? Oh, you have to unmute yourself. Rachel, you're allowed to be unmuted.
All right, the poll is up.
Okay, so who knows what color oil heat is? Is it like bubbling crude? Is it like black gold? Is it like Texas tea? Are we talking Jed Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies? Is it ooey and gooey and icky and gross? Or is it, look what we're getting. Okay, green, that's interesting. That's interesting. Opaque, champagne. Okay, so we have a pretty good knowledge here. Okay, let me move the poll over and let me move on.
The right answer.
Oh, I can't move my screen. Can I? No, I have to take down the poll. I'll minimize it. Let's see if that'll work. Okay. So the answer to your question is oil heat is crystal clear. It looks like vegetable oil. The black gold, the Texas tea, the crude, the gross black under your fingernails stuff that you associate with oil heat, or many people associate with oil heat, is so yesterday. Oil heat has changed so much in the equation. It is now crystal clear and it looks like vegetable oil. And you're going to find out there that in a moment there is a component of vegetable oil in it. Okay, biggest objection I ever get. And you in Connecticut, you're comfortable with oil heat because it's everywhere in Connecticut. But there is this misconception out there that it's very expensive to heat with oil. And if you live in an area where natural gas is an option, a lot of people would prefer that because they think it's less expensive. I heard on the news a few years ago, you may remember, prices went sky high. Prices back in July 2008 went up to $5. It went up so high. Remember when you filled your cars at the gas station in July 2008? It cost $5 a gallon. Connecticut almost hit $5 a gallon. You guys were the most expensive. And the price of oil heat correlates with the price of gasoline because the base is all crude. So people correlate what happened in July 2008 with prices going sky high out of nowhere. And doesn't our oil come from the Middle East? You know, what if another war breaks out? Are we going to have a problem? Are we not going to be able to get oil? So let's hit these all head on because these are really biggies that you just need to be able to have a conversation about them. First of all, it's never been a better time to heat with oil. Prices are so darn low. And if any of you heat with oil, I know Rachel does, you know that. And what you also know is that it's been really low for a really long time. Forget COVID. During COVID, they're giving it away. It's so inexpensive because simple supply and demand. Nobody was using their cars during lockdown. Nobody was flying in commercial airplanes. So all that crude was just piling up and building up. So there was like 3 months where nobody used any. So there was so much oil that people were just giving it away. The prices were ridiculous. But let's talk reality before COVID, because COVID is an anomaly. Before COVID, prices were on a 13-year low. And before COVID, according to Forbes, the price prediction into the future is consider the prices before COVID the ceiling. And it was only predicted to get better over the next 3 to 5 years. So the forecast after we're done with COVID, God willing, is still really, really, really good. So that's important. But what about when it skyrocketed? You know, how do I know it's not going to skyrocket again? How do I know that I'm not going to have another July 2008 in 2 years and then prices will go so high I can't afford to fill my tank, I can't afford to heat my home? And that's a legitimate fear. So the only way you can know that is by taking a walk back in history and checking out the graphs and checking out what history says about price spikes. And you know what, guys? You have to go all the way back to 1975 to find another major crisis in the oil heat industry. And some of us will, some of us won't. Some of us will remember 1975. There was a phenomenon in the mid 70s that took place. It was called odd even days. We remember odd even days. Yes, we do, because for those of you that were not alive yet, but odd even days was the term because there was an oil moratorium because of a war in the Middle East. There was an oil moratorium and we couldn't get our supply of energy. So what happened, we had a huge shortage, and what happened was our gas stations had to be regulated, and you were not allowed to fill up your gas tank on your car at will. You could only fill up your car on an even day of the month if the last digit on your license plate was even, or on an odd day of the month if the last digit on your license plate was odd. That's how they were regulating it. And there were miles long lines. You waited for 2 hours at a time. And in many cases, when you got up to the pump and it was your turn, the big cardboard came out with the black marker saying, sorry, out of gas. And you were just out of luck. So that's the memory. And you know what? That's muscle memory. But that was the last major crisis in the oil industry. So then you could say to me, well, yeah, that was because a war broke out in the Middle East. What if another war breaks out? New president, you know, that goes with the history. When you have a new president, problems happen as they're getting their feel with handling the new president. So what happens if we have another war? Well, if we have another war, absolutely nothing happens, because we are now 100% foreign independent. We learned our lesson in 1975. And that lesson was the United States cannot remain foreign dependent for one of our most important energies that we were importing. We had to build our own stockpile. And to boot, something else that we're doing, and you guys in Connecticut are the front runners in this. There is a regulation in Connecticut that every gallon of oil heat must contain a portion of bioheat fuel. What is bioheat? It's sunflowers, it's soybeans, it's algae, it's cooking oil, recycled cooking oil that's cleaned at the diners and the restaurants and is mandated in the state of Connecticut. And the forecast, my God, the forecast for the future is oil heat will become one of the most wanted fuels that's ahead of itself, because the game plan is to eliminate oil from oil heat, eliminate heating oil from the oil that we use to heat our homes, 100% sunflowers, soybeans, algae, and recycled cooking oil, 100% foreign independent, 100% grown in the United States. That's the future. We're about to become the most modern energy for heating our homes. And everyone knows that oil heat is the warmest to boot. Okay, so the evolution of oil heat. And I already went through this, so I'll just skip. But it is a blend of biodiesel fuel, conventional oil, and bioheat, and it becomes bioheat fuel. And you're going to start noticing this on radio advertisements, on TV, on trucks that drive by you. You'll start seeing every oil heated home has bioheat fuel in it, and people don't even know.
Oops.
So what's different about ultra low sulfur? That's important. You know, there's a generation out there that really cares about our footprint. They really care about what we're doing. It reduces maintenance issues and breakdowns. It's so smooth. It's like a lubricant. And it has actually proven to be better for the systems, and it keeps them going. And they have been reporting less middle of the night breakdowns since implementing bioheat. It's renewable. That's one word, all you have to say. That's very important to the millennials. They care about that. and 100% made in the good old USA, very important. But what's not different? It's the same price. That doesn't change one iota. Any heating system can use it. It could be an old clunker in the basement that's pre-turn of the century from the beginning of time, or it can be a new system. It doesn't matter. You don't need to do anything to your system, and it's delivered exactly the way oil heat has been delivered for all this time. But let's go into more objections. Yeah, we love the house, but we really wanted to get away from oil. Why? Ask them why. They may have all these things going around in their head that we don't even know, and they don't know, because a lot of them are just like, oh, I heard it somewhere. It was just planted in my head. So get them to talk, open up the conversation. And after you finish my presentation, you won't be afraid to start the conversation because you'll have so much information. Well, oil heat isn't modern. It's like my parents' oil heat. I want shiny, I want fresh, I want exciting. I don't want oil heat. That's for grandpa. No, talk about bioheat. Talk about the fuel of the future and where we're headed. That's what you talk about. Yeah, but my grandparents' house always smelled like oil. Yeah, mine did too. Apple pie and oil. It was like you walked in and you knew that's what it smelled like, because that's yesterday's systems and yesterday's maintenance and yesterday's plan. Because, you know, we've all walked into a home and smelled oil heat. And if a buyer thinks it should smell, well, that's it. It's over. They're not going to buy an oil heated home. The truth of the matter is a healthy, well-maintained, oil heated home should never smell like oil. And if it does, that's an indication that there's a problem with the furnace or the boiler. That's an indication that you need to get on the phone and call for service, because a healthy system will never give off an odor of oil. People think the smell is coming from the tank. It's coming from a system that's either misfiring, needs a tune-up, needs a filter changed, needs something tightened. And the good thing about that is it's an early warning detector. If you smell it, call for service. Not like some of the other energies where it's called the silent killer. Oil heat will never be called the silent killer, because if you smell it, you call for service. And if you're showing a property to a client, you know, you're showing the third house and that's setting them up to buy the fourth house. We know how that works. So the third house is close, but nah, the fourth house is the one they're going to buy. They just need to figure that out. If the third house smells like oil and the fourth one is heated with oil, they'll never buy the fourth house. Unless when you're in the third house, you say, you know what? Let me call. If it's your listing, let me call the homeowner. Or if it's someone else's listing, let me call the listing agent. You know, I'm showing the property and the homeowners may not even be aware that I can smell oil. It's time to call for service. You're welcome. End of problem. That's how I would handle that objection. But the walls behind grandma's radiator were always so dirty. I remember there was lines behind the radiator. We've seen them, the lines behind the radiator. And if you see them when you're showing an oil heated home because Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner didn't do their cleaning well enough, if you see lines behind a radiator, point it out. Do not let it go subliminally to the head of your buyer. Those lines behind the radiator, they think it's soot. What their mind is saying, oh, I don't want my baby breathing in soot because it's from oil. I don't want that. You know what it is? It's common household dust that has floated down, and the heat of the radiator has baked it onto the wall in a pattern. If you take an oil heated home, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, get out the Windex. Get out a sponge and clean behind every radiator, because it gives a terrible subliminal message that we may not be able to address if another agent shows it. Isn't it inefficient and outdated? We're going to get to that in a little while in more detail. But it's a really, really old home and they have an underground oil tank.
Oy.
Isn't it more likely, isn't it probably leaking if it's really, really old? I mean, we know like how long does a roof last? Like 25 years. So if the roof is, 40 years and it's the third roof and the shingles are starting to lift, we're looking at the ceiling for watermarks, right? for leaks because it's the end of its economic life. So the assumption is if it's an older home, a really old home, and they have an active, quote unquote, non-leaking underground oil tank, how do I know it's not leaking? Because the older the tank, the more likely it is to be leaking. Wrong. Let's dispel that right now. If you're showing a really old property with an older oil heat tank, it's counterintuitive, but feel confident because the older the tank, the more likely it is not to be leaking. And the reason for that is because back in the day, they built those tanks so solid. They used such strong materials, strong steel, thick walls. Those aren't the ones that leaked. The ones that leaked are the ones from the 60s and the 70s. Those are the ones we get a little nervous about. Why? Because we had the Vietnam War. It makes perfect sense. We were shipping off materials to the military, and we had less materials to work with here in the United States. Therefore, we were building our supplies here with flimsier materials because we had less to work with. So if you're showing a property that was built in the 60s or the 70s with an active underground oil tank, I would talk to your buyers about insisting that tank be removed. Okay. But isn't it better to convert to gas? Like, isn't that like the way to go? And how much does it cost and all that stuff? We'll get to that. I have a slide for that. Okay. So, but I'm concerned that oil heat isn't clean. Like, I just feel like it isn't clean. Oil heat is 95% cleaner than 40 years ago. You see, the myths are based on 40 years ago, the old oil heat. And what's happening is the industry isn't doing a good enough job to educate the public, to educate the consumer on the modern strides in the industry. And that's what I'm doing for you today. So 95% cleaner and producing near zero levels of combustion emissions. That's what they want to hear. There's something I want to tell you about delivery. There is a big misconception, especially for a young buyer who's never purchased a home before, never operated a home, or somebody that is accustomed to natural gas, moving in from out of state, whatever the reason. People have this conception that when that oil truck pulls up to your driveway, you better have $700 lying around in your checking account to write a check for that delivery. Wrong. That's a big misconception. You don't have to write a check when that oil is delivered. There are payment plans. There are budget plans. There are so many options out there. You can even watch the market and on Wall Street. And when the prices go low, 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 you can call your oil dealer up and say, I know I don't need oil today, but I want to pre-buy a tank at that price. You can do that. There are many ways to do it, but people don't know that. But if you do pay for it up front, you'll probably get a nice 10% discount, which adds up, right? That's a lot of money. But there's something you don't know about that the bigger companies offer, not the mom and pops because they're too small, but the bigger companies, and you know them out there. And if the bigger companies offer a payment program called PAYGO, P-A-Y-G-O, PAYGO, and it means pay as you go. And it was modeled after the utility companies because nobody wanted to pay for their oil in advance before you use it. I don't want to pay for February's oil in January or December. So with PAYGO, what happens is you pick when you want to become a PAYGO customer, and you, whatever the price is on the day that you decide to do this is the price of that tank of oil. The truck comes out, they fill your tank, no money is exchanged. They put a monitor on the tank. That monitor sends a signal back to the oil dealer. And in that signal, it shows up on their computer. How many gallons of oil have reduced in that tank each day, every single day? And at the end of the month, you will get an invoice for the number of gallons per day that you use during that month, and you will only pay for what you used and not what you're going to use. It's called PAYGO, and it's revolutionary. You can Google PAYGO Connecticut oil heat, and you'll find somebody who will offer that to you. Tanks. Who doesn't want to talk about tanks? That's the modern above ground Roth tank. That's the most common tank today that is being used to replace old tanks. That's what they look like. They're made with corrosion resistant steel on the outside. This is what we're going to cover. I don't need to read it to you. You can read it. We already, okay, we're going to talk about the underground tank, blah, 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 all of this. I'm going fast because I want to get a lot of information in. So if I go too fast, you can interrupt me and slow me down. You can also ask me questions. Speaking of questions, how can you identify by looking at it when you're showing a property that that oil tank in the basement or in the backyard or on the side of the house needs to be replaced? How can you identify it? Rachel's going to put up a poll and we will find out what you think. How can you identify when an above ground tank needs to be replaced? And Rachel, I'm going to have you teach Sylvia, who is my coordinator, how to do these polls, because we're going to use these for our CE classes moving forward. We're teaching one on Friday even. I like it.
Absolutely.
Yep, I like it. All of the above, 100%. Everybody said that. Okay, visible signs, exposure to elements, weak or unstable lit diameter. Okay, these are really good answers. Great, you guys are on your game. I'm going to give it to you. That's exactly right. You're right. All of those are correct, but let's narrow it down. Oops, goodbye, poll. Okay, let's narrow it down. Okay. I guess I should, okay, don't mind me. The questions are new to me. Okay, I'm going to tell you without even getting to it. To answer we'll answer your question in the next slide. How's that? Okay, I'll go with the flow. There's two kinds of above ground tanks. There's a single wall tank and a double wall tank. Which one do I recommend to my clients? How do I know? Well, the double wall tank, Roth, for example, Roth is to tanks what Kleenex is to tissues. It's the known brand. And you also have the Granby, there's other ones, but for Roth, let's just use them. The double wall tank has a bladder inside, like a thermos. And the oil goes into the thermos inside the steel weather resistant outside. So it's in the bladder, in the thermos. That thermos is made of a material that's modeled after Tupperware. Grandma probably still has Tupperware in the fridge from 40 years ago. It's not leaking. So that's one of the reasons that I would recommend the double wall, because it gives protection, double protection. But more than that, it comes with $1 million warranty against leakage. They are that confident that that Tupperware is not going to leak. So if there's a manufacturer's defect, they'll cover it. So that's why you should go tell any of your clients that you care about, someone that, you know, you're going to visit them and drop off gifts on holidays, and you're going to keep them in your sphere of influence and hopefully sell their house again someday. You recommend to them the double wall. If you're working with a flipper who just wants to get that house sold, doesn't care about, you know, the top of quality and all that, they just want the cheapest materials in quick to get the house on the market, get it sold, and move on to the next house, you can recommend a single wall. Perfectly fine, a new single wall tank. The difference in price, single walled is $1,900, double wall is $2,300. Also, if you have an above ground tank, there's something called a tank enclosure. You may have seen that at a property. It looks like there's pool equipment or lawn furniture inside. There's actually an oil tank on its side inside. And that extends the life of the oil tank because it's protected from the elements. Okay, but back to the question. How can you identify when a tank visually needs to be replaced? So you're showing a property and you walk into the basement and you see this. First thing you're going to do is look to the underbelly. Is it bulging a little bit? is the shape kind of changed a little bit? Is the bottom starting to show a little belly? That tank is done. That tank needs to be replaced. Look at the legs. Are the knees starting to buckle? Do you see a knee? Just a slight knee there. Are they starting to buckle ever so slightly? That tank needs to go. That is, the weight of the oil is starting to give out on the steel of the leg. So that tank is coming to the end of its life. Corrosion. If you see corrosion, you can't just scratch it off. It's there for a reason. That tank needs to be replaced. So when you're showing properties, you can advocate for your buyer when you're looking at the oil tanks. What's the average life expectancy of a tank? Does anybody know? Oops. Oh, it's one of my questions. Aren't I smart? It's not showing up. I don't know why. Oh, there. Okay, it's disappearing. What do you think is the average life expectancy of an above ground tank? I want to hear what you think about this. Holy moly, we've got some good answers here. Good answers. Okay, do you think we're done? Whoever said 15 years got it right. It's only 15 years.
Wow.
It's not that long. And look at some of the tanks that we're finding at these houses, especially in Connecticut. Those tanks have to go. Underground tanks, we talked about that already, so I won't belabor it. Most don't leak. Now, that's of no consolation if you're dealing with a leaking underground tank. Here are the statistics. For what it's worth, the statistics. Less than 1/4% of all tanks tested in the United States will test positive for a leak. That's 1 in 400. But it's very common to find more than one leak in a neighborhood. Why? The soil content is the same in that neighborhood. The houses were built around the same time, which means the materials were manufactured around the same time, which means the quality of the material is probably very similar. So what you have is a perfect storm for another leak in a neighborhood.
Susan, we have a question.
Yes.
Diane is wondering if the life expectancy is longer than 15 years for the new tanks.
Nope, still 15 years. Good question.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you asked.
What about and single versus double walled?
Same life expectancy, double walled, less likely to leak. Does
Thanks.
that answer that question?
Yes.
Depends if you want to roll the dice. Cleaning up your basement is a big deal. Got to call like ServPro or somebody. Okay. And these underground tanks have become unnecessary, and we'll get into why. You know why they're there? I'm going to tell you why. Remember, we were going back in history to 1975 for the last oil spike in prices and crisis. Well, if you go back, it's about a 40-year cycle, 40 years, and it's traceable all the way back. But if you go back 20 or 30 years from the 70s to the late 40s, early 50s, you're going to find a lot of underground tanks around that time. The reason for that is prices were so darn low. It was so affordable. And everybody and their brother and their neighbor was putting these big tanks underground to stockpile oil, to buy it low and keep it at home. That was the mentality back then. Nobody thought ahead to what are the kids going to do with that oil tank. Out of sight, out of mind. They were never intended to be in the ground forever. And today's modern systems use so much less oil, and we'll get into that. You guys know, first of all, there is no law in the state of Connecticut that says you cannot close title on a property with an active, non-leaking underground oil tank. It is perfectly legal. It is done every single day. And you will find sellers who are not willing to take those tanks out of the ground. You know, I've had no problem with it. It's fine. And I'm selling the house with the underground oil tank. Well,
Do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
go ahead.
Many of the insurance companies and also many of the banks won't write a mortgage if there's an underground oil tank. And the insurance companies won't insure a property if there's an underground oil tank.
He said it. I don't need to say it. He said it. That's the next slide. So he said it. I don't know which slide it is, but it's coming. You're absolutely right. 100% right. It's perfectly legal to sell a house with an underground tank, but should you? No, because you can't get insurance. It's so hard to get mortgage insurance, homeowners insurance. The banks are saying no. Everybody's saying no. Everybody's saying, I want it out of the ground. It's a big headache. And more importantly, if Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner is so stubborn that they don't want to take it out before listing their property or before going on the market, then what they are doing is taking their pool of buyers for whatever price you gave them for the house, and they're narrowing down their pool of buyers to the number of buyers who are actually willing to take a chance on a house with an active underground oil tank. They are doing themselves a disservice. And when you have a small pool of buyers versus a large pool of buyers, what happens to the ultimate sale price? Down, down, down. So they are doing themselves a terrible disservice. Okay, you're familiar with this. It can be anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000. It can be 30,000. It can be 50,000. It's expensive. So it's nothing to take lightly. This is one of the reasons that buyers don't want to take on the potential problem of having an underground oil tank. Testing the tank is something that if all else fails, if you can't get them to take the tank out of the ground, there are tests. It can provide peace of mind. There are a few tests that you can offer. One is a soil test, which if you ask me means very little. Soil test is where they stick a pole in the ground, and if there's oil where they stuck it, then they get a positive read. If they stick it in the ground and there's no oil, then you get a negative read. They're going to stick it all around where they think there might be an oil tank or where they think the oil tank exactly is. If you're having a soil test, be present. It is so easy to stick that pole in the ground near the fill pipe. If they do, they will most likely get a false positive. Now, I can tell you from experience, I'm a Jersey girl. I didn't pump gas once in my life before I took this job. Then I started ruining all my shoes because I come to Connecticut, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm spilling it all over the place. There's going to be oil on the ground near the fill pipe. Be present, make sure that whoever's doing the inspection isn't near it. There's also 3 tests, and I'm just going to give them to you really quick. I'm trying to watch the clock. You have the pressure test, you have the vacuum test, you have the electronic probe test. The pressure and the vacuum are in the same category. They're dangerous tests. If you're going to have them, call your local oil dealer and ask who they would use to do that test for their daughter or their sister. Get somebody that has experience, that knows how to do this. Don't just call up ABC tester on Google because the price is really, really low, because those 2 tests can cause a leak. The pressure test, they're exerting pressure on the inside of the tank. They're putting air into the tank, listening for whistles. What happens when you blow a balloon up and you put more air in after it's reached capacity? You run the risk of it exploding. Your eyes are squinting and you're like nervous. You run the risk of causing a leak in a compromised tank that might be ready to have a leak, but hasn't yet sprung one. So be very careful who you use for a pressure test. For a vacuum test, you're doing exactly the same thing, but opposite. You're sucking the air out of the tank, listening for whistles. For holes, again, very dangerous. A very good test that I recommend is the electronic probe test. That's where they just drop a probe into the tank. It's attached by a wire to the truck, and it works by sonar. It's like deep sea fishing, where you find a school of fish from sonar waves, and they're just checking for waves, for sonar waves, to see if there's a pinhole in that tank. It is non-intrusive. It is not dangerous at all. Tank insurance is very, well, this is, I don't know who said it, but this is your slide. Very hard to come by if you buy a house with an underground oil tank. Almost nobody will write a homeowner's policy with an active underground oil tank, but there are 4 who will. So I recommend right now that you write this down. Or if you don't want to write it down, if you don't have a pen handy, you'll have my contact information and I'll send it to you. So the 4 are New Jersey manufacturers, the Farmers, Chubb, and Philadelphia contribution ship. They will all write a policy. If you have an above ground tank and it's looking a little difficult, it looks like it's reaching the end of its economic life, but Mr. and Mrs. stubborn homeowner won't replace it, get tank insurance. It's transferable. It costs next to nothing. It's very inexpensive. ProGuard and TankSure will give you tank insurance for an above ground tank. Transferable to your buyer. Okay. So who knows what's the difference between a boiler and a furnace? Question, please. Vanna White is going to put it up on the screen. Okay, Sylvia, you don't get that, but Rachel does. Okay. What is the difference between a boiler and a furnace? A boiler heats water and a furnace heats air.
Wait, were you referring to Wheel of Fortune?
I was.
I love Wheel of Fortune.
But do you know who Vanna White is?
Yes, the one who taps the board.
Yes, okay, good, good.
See, if you were my age, you would know that Vanna used to turn the letters.
Right, exactly. And with a beautiful sparkling dress on.
Every night.
Every night, a different one. Okay, so a furnace heats water and a boiler heats air. A boiler heats water and a furnace heats air. Let's get rid of this and let's get to the answer.
Oops, oops.
A boiler is a water-based system. So, and think about boiling the kettle. You'll never forget it. You boil the kettle for a cup of tea, or you use your Keurig. But in the old days, we used to boil the water in a kettle. So a boiler is the kettle that heats the water, okay? A furnace is air-based. It heats air, and that's the difference. That's all you need to know. Ha! I bet. I see that smile. Phil, I saw your smile. Phil has seen these before.
Yeah, John and I have seen a lot of these, right, John?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What do we call that bottom one?
Octopus.
I owned one of those once in a house, and my wife and I fixed the whole house up, and we had it all fixed up and ready to rent. We turned the heat on, and it blew black soot all over the house, and we painted it all over again.
Okay.
Yeah, the house I grew up in, the furnace was started out life as a coal furnace, and you had to shovel coal into it, and it was that kind of a furnace. It had with the octopus legs on the top.
The old converted coal burner, and they're still out there. You're selling them.
I just sold a house that was built in the 1700s, and the furnace there was older than anything on these pictures.
Isn't that crazy?
I can't even, I didn't recognize it.
How the heck do you sell this to a millennial? They want shiny and new. They don't want these things, but these are out there. And if you have the listing, if it's your listing, you better be able to sell this to somebody. So how old is too old? Well, the truth of the matter is that these old systems will outlast our grandchildren. They just go on and on and on and on. And the reason for that is that when they were built back in the day, they were built so darn well that they don't die. And Mr. and Mrs. homeowner, well, let me improve the kitchen. Let me put a new kitchen in. Let me put a new roof on, a new bath, because the furnace still works. Why should I replace it? It ain't broke. Why fix it? But the problem is trying to sell them. So, we need to explain why they're still there. They're still there because Anyone who owns an oil heated home knows that you need to maintain the system annually. That's part of the process, maintaining the system annually. Once a year before heating season, you bring in a service guy and they do a tune-up on your heating system. They do preemptive fixing. They replace anything, parts that are about to go. They tighten anything that needs to be tightened. They change the filter. And this is how they're maintained. And this is one of the reasons they last so long. You don't do that with natural gas. You just let it go. So you explain why they're still there, because they're built so darn well and so well maintained. Number two, they will outlast 3 lifetimes of the electric heat pumps. 3 lifetimes. The problem is efficiency, and this is where oil heat gets a bad name. They didn't have efficiency back at the pre-turn of the century. They didn't have that. They didn't even have that word. They didn't have the technology back then. So these systems are probably using way too much fuel. They're probably using much more than they need to heat that house because their efficiency is so low. But taking that out and upgrading it in the future, you don't have to do it today. You buy the house, you upgrade it, you improve the property. You can reduce with a new middle of the line, technologically advanced, energy efficient system. You can lower your bills by up to 40%. But how do I sell it? That's all well and good that by upgrading, you can lower the bills by 40%. But what do I say to my millennial client? What do I say to my family that's never had a house before? Look at this furnace right here. I would say, oh my God, that's old. But let me tell you something. These things have been really well maintained. That's why they're here. Let's take a look at the maintenance records. Now, they're either by the furnace, by the boiler, or Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner has them upstairs. So you take out the maintenance records and you show it to your buyer. Look, in 2020, they did this. In 2019, they did this. In 2018, 2017, 1965, 1964, this was done. This is how well maintained this system has been by my service guy. They know it intimately. That gives peace of mind. And another thing I recommend you do is if they really love the house and they really want to buy the house, but they're nervous about this, call their service company. Say, Mr. Manager, can a service guy come out and meet with my buyer? They want you to evaluate the health of a really old system in the basement. And they'll come out and they'll discuss the maintenance records with your buyer. They'll open it up, shine a flashlight in it. They'll show your buyer what good shape it's in. Do that. If they're going to buy that house, do that before the home inspection. Because once the home inspection happens, you know what's going to happen. The home inspector is going to be like, oh my God, this is awful. This is terrible. Oh my God, you have to replace this. And your buyers, they're going to scare the heck out of your buyers. But if you have a serviceman, a professional come in and evaluate the health of that system before home inspection, by the time you get to home inspection, they'll be, oh, we're good. We had a professional in, we have a plan. So that's a really good idea. And remember, the maintenance record is like the Carfax of the heating system. And you can explain it like that. It gives them peace of mind. It lets them see exactly how well cared for the heating system has been. And if this is your listing, you better take those service records and make a copy and put them on the dining room table with your property brochure, so that when Mr. and Mrs. Young Buyer comes through and they first walk in and they see the beautiful upstairs, they're prepared for what they're going to find downstairs and how well maintained it's been. This addresses the question, well, shouldn't we just convert it since it's old? Shouldn't we just take it out? If there is natural gas on the street, shouldn't we just replace it with a natural gas? They can. If that's what they like, they absolutely can. But according to the Consumer Energy Council of America, it makes no sense. It makes no economic sense to convert from one fuel to another. They did a study, and what they found is that you never recoup the cost of conversion But if you upgrade the old clunker to a modern, technologically advanced, energy efficient system, you can lower your heating costs by as much as 40% and use less fuel. Back in the day in 1980, it took 1,300 gallons to heat a house. Today, it takes about 700 gallons. It takes almost half the amount of oil with a modern, technologically advanced, energy efficient system. They're not that expensive. People think I'm going to spend $10,000, $12,000. You can get a Real McLean middle of the line. You don't need a Baderis, which is a Ferrari of heating systems, which sapphire blue, gorgeous. Who needs gorgeous? You don't need gorgeous. You need something that'll heat the house and reduce your heating costs by as much as 40%. Now that $3,473 does not include installation. So you can look between around $5,000 to upgrade and reduce your heating costs by 40%, and you will recoup the cost of that in amortized savings in about 6 years. But it gets better. Through the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association, who I'm representing today, they're offering rebates. They're using the grant money that comes from NORA, the National Oil Heat Research Alliance, and they're offering rebates. You can get up to $1,300 in rebates. You can get $1,000 off a new oil-fired water boiler. You can get $650 off a furnace or a boiler with 90% or more AFUE. You can get $300 off a new above ground double walled oil tank. So if you're showing that property with the buckled legs and the underbelly spread, and you want to go to Mr. and Mrs. homeowner and say, we'll buy the house, but we want a new oil tank, you can say, did you know that there's rebates available? You can get up to $300 off a new oil tank. Give them that information. It may make the difference. $150 off a single wall tank. Your flipper will love it. You can save up to $820 a year by upgrading from that old clunker, from that old converted coal burner or that old octopus to a modern system for $5,000. And get the rebate, get $1,000 off. I'm gonna zoom through this because we're running out of time. You know about energy efficiency. You know that's important. The one thing that you need to keep in mind, that energy efficiency has nothing to do with the fuel choice, but everything to do with what's happening in the basement. It's all about the system. Okay, I'm gonna skip this. Smart thermostat. These are things you do. Did you know running your ceiling fan in reverse will lower your heating costs? It pushes the warm air down and it forces your thermostat to recognize the temperature of the air is warmer, and it won't force it on. Did you know that installing a smart thermostat will reduce your heating costs by as much as 10%? So I just taught you how to get your heating bills down by 50%. Okay, here's the end.
I have a question.
Go ahead, hit me with your question.
Can you send me the information about the rebate stuff? I just sold a house to someone with an oil system, and he's in the process of shopping to get a new tank. We got some money from the sellers because the tank was obviously old. But I'd like to know about those the rebates.
Won't you be a hero? Yes.
The website was in the.
I did put the link in the chat for the upgradeandsavect.com.
But I will give you an opportunity to request that in a few minutes. I'm going to give you a place where you can request all this stuff. Okay, so I'm also going to send you materials. What I want you to do is at the end, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask for materials. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask for more details on anything that you want more information about. I'm going to send you a realtor's guide to selling oil heated homes, which will recap a lot of what I shared with you today. I'm going to send you a homeowner's guide to heating with oil. It's great. It has everything that we talked about, all these objections, all in one little, here, let me show you, all in one little brochure. And I'll send it to you. You can give it to buyers. You can put 10 of these out next to your property brochure and ask when other realtors show your property, put a little tent note saying, take one, please. That way you can be sure that when buyers come through your property, they're picking up the facts about oil heat. And this does not send you to any one particular oil dealer. It's not propaganda. It's put on by the National Oil Heat Research Alliance, which is like NAR. Okay, so we're going to send you that. We're going to send you a guide to heating oil storage tanks and how to get your energy costs down by 40%. Here's your websites. We will send you these if you ask for them. CTEMA.com is a very important website to you. That's where you're going to find an oil dealer to help you if you need a one-on-one, if you need them to come out and help you with a client. Okay, this is the website to order a box of materials. It's www.oilheatpros.com/CT, but we'll also give you another place to order them as well. And there is the link for the rebate, upgrade, and AND spelled out, savect.com. We're going to now put you in a drawing to say thank you for taking the time to join us. We're going to put you in a drawing for a $1,000 American Express gift card that we're pulling in January as a way of saying thank you. And right now, I'd like you to go to www on your phone or your computer, and I'll talk you through it if you need to minimize, www.oilheatpros.com/win, WIN. This is where you're going to request materials. This is where you're going to request more information. So go on your phone to www, you need W's, .oilheatpros.com/win, WIN. Enter your zip code because we're national. So we need to know what state we're going to send you information on. And once you've entered your zip code, if you look, there'll be a place to register with Pros and win. What I want you to do is put in there if you want us to ship you materials, if you want more links, more information, and most importantly, I'm begging you for feedback. I'm begging you because my boss reads it and he doesn't know if I'm good or not. He doesn't know if I do a good job, and my review is coming up. So if you would be so kind as to leave a little feedback, if you liked today's presentation, send me some love and show my boss that I did a good job and show us that we presented some value to you. And if you would like more information on my CE classes that I teach, I have them all set up in January and February, 6 dates. Plus, I'm going to talk to Rachel, 100% guarantee. She's going to put me on the schedule for the board, for the association as well. And so that's what I got for you today. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was some really great information.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. So please continue and fill these out for us, and we'll get you all that information that you need. Here is my contact information. And I always tell my friends in the real estate industry, add me to your cell phone as Oil Heat Susan. You will never forget Susan. I mean, you will never remember Susan Janett. I'm going to just fly away after this. But when you're in the middle of a crisis and you have an oil heat question, you need Oil Heat Susan to the rescue. So enter my cell phone. It's right there on the screen. And I take calls when I'm awake. I'm not a 9-to-5. I was born in the business. I understand your challenges, and I will make myself available to you if I'm not drunk. No, I'm kidding. I'm only kidding. It's COVID. I will make myself available to you when you need me. So that's what I got for you today.
Excellent. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Great. Okay, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me in, Rachel.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Rachel.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
And
Okay,
for Cindy,
All
we are,
Thank
right.
you.
Have a nice holiday.
Bye now.
we are having a YPN presentation tomorrow. Doug Blackwood is presenting on radon. I did put the link to register in the chat. So if you want to join in on that, it's tomorrow, 11:30 to 1. Would love to have you.
All right.
Okay, I'm out. Bye,
Take care,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Bye, Rachel. Thank you.
Have fun in the snow.
If I could figure out how to leave, these things always make